Um, okay, let's get going. Uh, Thanks for jumping on. I'm with Tom Holbrook. Tom, you were on a book club. Have you been
I was
on
on book club.
have you been on the podcast besides the book club?
No.
Okay. That's right, because you're part of the Slack, but you weren't part of the Flannery O'Connor episode.
No, I missed it, which is
You
too
weren't
bad.
there to defend. You were there
Because
to
my
defend
my
Flannery.
daughter's my daughter's named Flannery, so we are
Yeah.
fans.
And you are the author of the Red Riley series, which is a detective mystery adventure. Is that how you describe it?
Uh, there, I call them fast-paced, funny thrillers, which of course is stupid because there is no humorous thriller category on Amazon.
Yeah. Well,
There's
I mean,
humorous horror,
yeah.
but not humorous thriller. But in other words, they are thrillers in that the it's about a cop who's wrongly accused for a terrorist attack, and she has to clear her name. And once she does that, spoilers, she does that. In the subsequent books, she decides to remain a vigilante.
Nice.
She's had it with the system, and she wants to help clean up Chicago on her own. So there's 4 books in that series, and then set in the same world is a book called The Levelers, and what I'm working on right now is the sequel to that. And
Awesome.
that series features husband and wife con artists, and they also have a 19-year-old teenager that they took in off the streets when she was 12. So those are the
Awesome.
3 main characters.
And that's Pearl, right?
Yes, that's
Awesome.
Pearl. And
Okay.
the man is grew up as an orphan from South America. The woman is Asian American but grew up in very white Indiana, and then Pearl is African American and grew up in Chicago.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, so today I just want to talk about we're going to talk about your process because you came to the mini conference we held on writing character voice and edited a piece, which was really fun. Thanks for sending it to me. I loved it. It was fun to read. And yeah, so I just want to talk about the process and how it was and what was going on with the character wheel. So let's do character wheel first.
Sure.
First off, good job with this. It's really
Well, it's
nice.
not. It was so much more than mini, Jeff. It was a maxi conference. It was
It was a
it was a
maxi
lot.
conference.
It was a lot.
It was a maxi pad of a conference. That's going to be our new slogan. It will, yeah. We're not going to riff on that. We'll just leave that where that was.
Amazing.
So it's dangerous talking in the morning because my filters aren't up yet. So I'll just say whatever. Yeah. So how did it? Couple questions. So you've got a really great chart. I love that you've pared down voice to like a few words per modulation. So for those who are on the podcast who can't see what I'm looking at on the screen, uh, yeah, always great podcasting to like talk about something and not describe it. You've got about 10 characters in, not about 10 characters. You've got 10 characters into your character wheel chart. If people don't know what a character wheel chart is, go to the website. It's up there for free. You can just go grab it and look at it. And not Tom's character wheel chart, but a blank one, so you can get an idea. And so this is kind of how I fill out mine. They're very I don't want to use the word sparse. I want to use the word strategic. It's like
Mhm.
I only put on there what I need because I don't want to like futz around with too many words.
And one of the things you said in the conference, or Laura said, was to put words that mean something to you.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need to be long because I know when I say conciliatory, I know what that means.
Yeah, it's totally just about triggering that voice in your head, getting what's in your head outside. Um, so talk to me a little bit about, well, I have kind of a complex question.
Sure.
Talk to me about your characters and then talk to me about what you learned about their voices with this exercise.
Yeah. So I had written half of this book um, pre-pandemic and then just totally stopped. But I had already written these characters before, so they're pretty strong in my head. And so after I started listening to Dialog Doctor podcasts and such, I was sort of roughing this out
Nice.
But after the conference, I sat down and I did it to this detail. And one of the things that I did, which is maybe slightly different than yours, or maybe exactly what you want people to do, but my modulation categories are very, very specific based on, because this is for editing, right? I'm already in the midst of writing this book,
Yeah,
so
you're in the middle of it.
I know who talks to whom.
Yeah.
So for instance, baseline voice for John and Julia, the main characters, they're together in almost every scene in the book. So
Nice.
their baseline is their voice with each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes sense. So, but then for almost every character, and then they're also con artists. So I have a category for when they're on, in quotes, meaning when
Yeah.
they're doing business, uh, and then and so then I also have stressed, which comes up a lot, and angry, which comes up occasionally, um, because in the plot they're on vacation. They've at the end of the first book they had this huge score, and they are Robin Hood thieves. So their job is to give that money away, and they've pretty much finished doing that, and they're on vacation, and they want Pearl to come with them, and she's on a different job. She is stealing water purification tech to give to countries in Africa.
Nice.
And so she shows up, and she's very busy, and she's like, wait, what? You want me to go on vacation? And then what happens is somebody who has found out who the Tylers are kidnaps Pearl in order to force them to do a job for them.
Gotcha.
So, um, so there's the last category is what that person's voice is like with a particular person. And for John and Julia, it's what it's like when they talk to Pearl, and then for the other characters, it's what they are like when they talk with another.
Oh, I'm sorry, I lost your volume. Can you still hear me? You can't hear me either. We're frozen. I lost you and you lost me. That's so weird. Let me see if we can find it
Oops,
again. Am I
there.
back?
Now I can hear. Yep,
So weird. I don't know what happened there.
I'm in the
So,
White Mountains. It could be connectivity.
oh, okay. This is just,
So I don't know
COVID life.
if you caught what I said or not, but
I caught you. You left off at somebody had kidnapped Pearl in order to force John and uh,
yeah,
his.
that's about it. So that last column is how specific people interact with other specific people, and for John and Julia, it's
Gotcha.
how they interact with their daughter, which is very specific. I think your voice with your kid should be very different then.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I built this chart, I built it for me, which is my books are always from a singular point of view perspective, right? Like I take one character and like run with that point of view. So the like different modulations always worked fine if I had like one set of modulations at the top of the chart. But as I've started working with people, especially people who are writing like multiple POVs, I've realized like, oh, every character kind of needs their own line of modulation. So a lot of times when I'm working, especially if I'm working with like a fantasy author, they'll have like 15 voices. So it's like, okay, we got to put like a line of modulation of like what the modulations are, and then the characters modulations, and then another like header that's like different modulations, and then like the character, and then like another header, because it's like, well, this character's stressed all the time, but I this character we never see as stressed, never ever. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
um
I think that's a good idea.
yeah, but it reminds me of what you're doing with the with X column, like where they're moving with different people and they sound different with different people.
Mhm.
I think that's great. How did you, so when you were building this, did you notice anything about the way the voices sounded together? Like, was there anything you kind of discovered through the process?
Yeah, I think the wheel is sort of is just getting out what you already know about these characters on the left side, um,
Yeah.
and um, and so I've written a whole book with these characters, and John and Julia are together a lot, um, and they definitely have different voices, but um, they sounded an awful lot alike sometimes. Um, and so one of the things that I did was I really looked at John's voice, which is he's a guy who only needs to be right on the important things. So he's not very argumentative at all. He's very agreeable. He's very calm. And then when things go wrong, he steps in and he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And if
Yeah.
anyone gets away, he also gives everybody second and even third chances. But when he's done with you, he is done with you. Um, and Julia is much more, she's more friendly. She sort of regrets that they're by themselves so much. So she, um, um, and she's a little more playful in language and such. And so I just tried to get that out more, and then
Yeah.
went back and in editing tried to spread that out. And then the other thing I was really looking at, which is why I sent you a specific scene there at the beginning, is like the mother-daughter kind of stuff um, has to sound different than whatever all the other conversations sound like. And I was not doing that previously. So I looked really hard at um, how Julia would talk and how Pearl would talk. And I wanted it to be specific to Julia and not just any mom talking to any kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really like so like the stressed and threatened column, how their three voices change there. I can really see that you've got the potential for some really great conversations there, like with John and Julia, the him going hyper logical and like calm and commanding in moments of stress, where she's going to talk faster and bargain, like that could create some really great like back and forths between them. But then throwing Pearl in there, who kind of like seems, just looking at the chart, seems to have kind of like, a more explosive um reaction to stress and threatening, the like violent language, louder, she gets terse, she's gritting her teeth, right? Like the parallel between all three of them in moments of stress, especially in a thriller, is really nice. I imagine it's setting you up for some really great scenes where the three of them are processing that stress
Yeah.
together in
And
different ways.
in terms of parenting, Julia wants to understand Pearl and sort of convince her to do the things that are best for Pearl. And so does John, but his way of expressing it is he's going to lay out the absolute logical reason why she should do what he thinks she should do, and she's going to flip him off basically.
Yeah, and I like you're I see that a lot in the with X column, where you're talking about like how they are with Pearl and how Pearl is with them. That teenager like long suffering quips
Yeah.
and
And
whataboutisms is I have a teenage daughter, and you just
and
sum
she
it
was
up as giant eye roll. What were you
also
saying?
she was a street kid when they took her in. She was already
Hmm.
12, so
Yeah,
she's going to be less deferential.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
that any teens are differential.
yeah. I love it. How are you using this now as you edit/write?
Uh, so, I went through these scenes, and I'll go through the whole book since the conference, rewriting all the dialogue.
Nice.
Um, and I really also see that as a second pass of at least three, um, because I sent you stuff. The second draft that I sent you, not only hopefully you're going to make wise comments, but I didn't see that as the final. I mean, it needs more.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
felt like- So I felt like it's a more gradual process of that. But there's a lot of dialogue in this book. There's a lot of people talking to each other because they're con artists. You can't be
Yeah,
a
yeah. I was about to say they're conning each other all the time. You got to you
uh,
can't do it with hand motions. Uh,
the so I see it as multiple rounds.
nice.
And you've talked about highlighting just one character's voice in a scene,
Yeah.
using highlighters, and I haven't gotten that far yet. But basically, like, I took a scene between mother and daughter, Julia and Pearl, and I really went back through saying, okay, Julia is going to be more um, she's going to be more conciliatory. She's going to be almost pleading. She's not going to be preachy, and she's really going to be empathetic. She's going to say, I know, I get what you're doing,
Yeah.
but we really want you. We're really concerned for you. Um, and Pearl is going to be, not angry, not shouty, but sort of sighing and, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
And in the scene, she actually is even, and she does a lot of whataboutism. Like, how can you give me
Nice.
this advice when you do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
You're totally pulling that off in the scene.
this particular scene, she sort of softens on her mom at the end. Like,
Nice.
okay, she sort of gives in. So
Yeah.
I'd be interested in what you thought of those changes and what I missed.
Yeah. And let's pull it up. Yeah, I will say, when I first started writing, so I'm going to pull up on the screen. I'm going to put your first draft is on the left and your second draft is on the right, which was fun. I've actually never looked at somebody's edits like this before.
Yeah, I thought it would be interesting.
Oh man, I
I'm
went down
actually
a rabbit hole. It was super fun.
this is
Oh,
directly a result of the conference. So
nice. Um, yeah, it's, you were talking about doing 3 passes. When I wrote my first book, I, I did a like super I wrote it and then I immediately gave it to a friend to edit, to Laura to edit. I didn't even do a second read. She like read my rough draft and she sent back all these notes and I did a second pass where I like put in her notes and then I published it. And I thought to myself, I remember when I published it, I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? When I become, after like a couple more books, when I get good at this, I probably won't even have to do a second pass. I was like, oh, I'll get so good. I don't have to edit. But I realized with each book, I actually like start adding passes to what I do. So I'm
well,
like, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I used to do the thing where I would reread like the last 2 chapters each day before I started writing and fix them. So
Yeah,
my final first draft was pretty good, but that also like bogged down my time. So now I'm working on the get to the end,
get
right?
to the end.
First draft is get to the end as fast as you can, and then
Yeah, yeah. But I do. I think for this book I'm doing right now, I'm gonna end up doing like 4 or 5 passes, and it's like, it's not a small one. It's like 180,000 word book. So
so anyway, this first draft was literally a first draft. I did not
nice.
clean it up before sending it. So
Yeah. So the piece you sent me has several scenes here, which is great. And it's got I liked this first one, which is this conversation between Julia and Pearl. Um, what's fun is I didn't read your description up top. I just went right into the narrative, and I could totally get that they were mother-daughter from reading it right off the bat. So
great.
even though it doesn't say it, you nailed it, which is great. So the first line, you started editing her voice right away. So originally you wrote, "What's on the train that you want?" Pearl asked, exasperated. "Is it the rich old lady? She can have more than a few thousand jewels." And the new version says, "Okay, what's on the train?" Pearl asks, exasperated. "Is it the rich old lady? She can't have more than a few thousand jewels." So what led to the edit of that front line?
All I really did was get rid of the uh, that you want and added the sort of um, interjection, the okay,
Yeah.
which to me was Pearl saying not what is it you're after, but I know you're after something, and let's cut to the chase.
Yeah, I totally read it. So I loved the change because it highlights the exasperated,
It's
right?
literal.
The like pause, the word period, short question, exasperated, all three really work together nicely. Um so yeah, I really it's a nice shift. And I know that's for the first thing we talk about in the piece, that's super like hyper editing, but just to point out, like I liked how you're changing the words there just to match the emotional tone that she's got going on. This is really great. It's nice edit. So then moving down, you have this you blew out this conversation a little bit. And this was something I saw you doing a lot, was just adding, like, slowing down. Was that
Yeah,
intentional?
absolutely. And doing more of the back and forth. Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I really worked on. I wanted to give Julia more because after doing the character wheel, I really felt like one of the ways that I wanted to make her voice different, especially from John's, was to have her be a bit more more verbose, and I came up with her using more imagery, so she describes
Nice.
things more. um, I wanted a way for the husband and wife's voices to be different, and so I made him a little bit more low key, and I made her a little more talkative, and especially using images. So she
Yeah.
added things like an angel or stretched, like, I mean, I added some similes and metaphors in there just for Julia.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I liked, so it was interesting. I read through the first draft of this scene, and then I came in and read the second draft, and then I read them together line by line. And I really liked the way you stretched out the conversation. I found myself connecting it's interesting you say that, because I found myself connecting much more to Julia in the second pass through. In the first pass through, she seemed almost like a stand-in for Pearl's conversation. And if I hadn't have gone back and looked at the character wheel, I don't know from this scene that I would have thought Julia was a recurring character
and
until I got to the second read. And then I was like, oh, no, this is, yeah, I can hear her voice. I like it.
and for me, in the first draft, Julia was just like, why aren't you on the train with us?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the second draft, it was, what's going on with you? The second draft is much more Julia thinking about Pearl, I think, than just trying to get her to do what she wants.
Yeah. And I think this line right here is a great representation of that, which is one that I can't tell if you added it or just blew it out a little bit more. But this Pearl size, I'm fine. I've just got things to do. When you told me you wanted me here, I thought you needed me for a job. I thought it was important, which is nice because it's feeding that whole, like, the sigh and the, like, pacing of it really feeds that exasperated. And then, but we've got this line from Julia. It is important. I know you don't understand. I get it. I do. But I made John pinky swear no jobs while we disperse the money from the Grafton heist. No jobs for a year. So, like, you can tell that, like, I liked this line because it communicated that she's, like, planning and plotting, kind of like moms do for their kids, that, like, I'm gonna line up. I have a vision in my head of what this is gonna be, and I'm applying it to you, which I think it was just a really nice touch. And then down here, you added that, like, for Julia beamed, and then he's been so good. But then you, like you're talking about, you have that, like an angel, so much better than I ever expected. That, like, just blowing out her lines a little bit to give us that connection with her and to illustrate the, like, connection between the two of them was really great. I thought it was nice editing. And then I really liked you added this, talking about the hyper back and, like, the not the hyper, the quick back and forth between the two of them. You added this like, really quick exchange, which was great because it started to, like, build the momentum of the piece for me. Like, that, like, rapid fire back and forth, like, made me feel very present in the moment. Um, which I think, especially down here where they start kind of, like, finishing each other's sentences, right? Like, John is making inquiries. Until then, I'd feel better if you were with us. This isn't Chicago. Uh, this is a freaking hayfield, right? Like, Pearl says this is a freaking hayfield, and then Julia jumps back in and says, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous, right? Like this, so that interrupting of each other and like speaking on top of each other is a really nice way to show intimacy between the two of them.
Yeah, I wanted it to be like an argument about whether they're going to wear jeans to church or not, but be about, gangsters and people trying to kill each other. So
Yeah, it totally sounds that way, and you totally like drop the, you know, a second ago when we were talking about the character reel for Pearl, the like, visible eye roll, you totally nailed that visible eye roll, which was really fantastic. I loved it. Um, yeah, it was fun. So talk to me about, I didn't highlight the second piece, so I'm just going to bring up your second draft. Talk to me about this next scene where you've got Julia and Frau Brockler coming up.
okay, yeah. So this is chapter 10, and this is just a character scene. So they've gotten on this train, which is an antique replica slow train in northern Spain, which goes about 15 miles per hour, and it's Julia's idea of a vacation,
Yeah,
not necessarily John's. And what you're getting here is basically the base level of all the secondary characters. So this is all, and also Julia and John's base level, because there's no tension going on here till the last paragraph.
yeah,
So this is a chance to see how they sort of interact with other people, and they're not specifically on a job either. So, but it's introducing characters that, except for Frau Brockler, who's basically a one-off, the other characters
okay,
all have 3 or 4 scenes. They all have enough scenes that they modulate a bit, and
gotcha.
so there is, 2 Brits, a husband and wife. They're in their early
Yeah,
50s. One of them's retired financial guy and ex-military, and the other, is a, I guess, African British woman who, had her own cooking show on BBC.
gotcha.
And, and then you also have the Bressons, who are French, and it is a 70-something-year-old father who retired amid a scandal from the French government, and his grown children, who are grown children. Um, they're very selfish, self-absorbed. The woman is, a insurance executive, very big time, and the guy is trying to follow his father's footsteps, but is hampered by his father's problems, and so now he's trying to distance himself from his father.
Gotcha.
And then you have Oscar. I don't know if Oscar's in there or not, but he's basically the maitre d' of the train. He's the
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't think I read Oscar.
okay.
If I did, he's just got a line or two that I missed.
So there's 3 little sections here. First,
Yeah,
there's Julia, who has just met the, Stephen and Amani, and, they're the Rhodes,
yeah,
and, she has just met them, and Frau Bachler walks by and restarts a conversation that Julia had with her.
nice. I love the conversation between Frau Rockman and Julia because it's one of these like miscommunication scenes that can really give us insight into characters. And I like that so from the first draft to the second draft, you really blew out Frau Bachman a little bit more. Like you gave her, I could see you pushing her to like the more extreme voices a little bit, and it had a really nice effect on the piece, like making that side character a little bit louder, mostly just to see Julia handle this woman talking about her nationality, which was, yeah, a fun scene here.
I
um
wanted to show Amani as sort of warm and not in everybody's business, but like eager to engage, and her husband not so eager and to engage, because
yeah,
that's sort of their character throughout. So I wanted
yeah,
that through.
yeah, and you get it, little things that we do that you've done in the piece, like um Amani looked at Julia, right? Like just these little phrases here, those really communicate that like compassion and empathy. Amani watched her go. I don't know if you were doing those intentionally, but the like attention on other people can really communicate that like empathetic connecting with another person, which I thought you did really well here in the piece. That was nice. Yeah. So down here with the Breesons, again, I love how you're driving everything with dialogue. Um, do you do a dialogue first draft, or do you
I,
just naturally driving
I
with dialogue?
don't, but I usually second or third draft I have to do more description and such because
Mm,
I tend to leave that out as I'm going.
nice.
Uh,
Yeah. Well,
and
it feels very natural.
the other series I do is first person, so it's like somebody telling a story, so it almost always feels like dialogue. And I with those I also on later drafts I go back and I add detail because I tend to skimp on background detail when I'm drafting.
Yeah.
So but I never but dialogue is always sort of upfront. Although I do, especially since listening. I mean, one of the reasons I also edit other people's books, and um, often one of my comments is this whole paragraph should be a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I find it, but I find it in my own work too. So
Well,
I'm
I'll
more
tell you, it's super rare that I don't find one, and I didn't find one in this piece. So, yeah.
I'm more aware than ever of that paragraph that tells the whole story that could have been a conversation. So
Yeah, I think it was, I thought she did a nice job with it. So switching point of view, that's really interesting. Which one do you like better?
uh,
First person or third person POV?
I've only done one character as first person, and it felt completely natural, which is weird because it's a woman's voice. But I just always knew what that character was gonna say.
Yeah, yeah.
I had her baseline and her modulations like all buried in my head. Um,
Nice.
with third person, what I like, which I'm not sure is how everybody does things, but I do a lot of. It's very close third person, so
Hmm.
it, the there'll be thoughts and descriptions that are clearly from the point of view of a certain character that
Yeah.
aren't dialogue. Um, Not to the point that it's annoying, but a chapter about one character is going to have a different feel to it than a chapter about another character because it's going to incorporate, it's going to sponge just a little bit of their opinions. Now, this one has a bunch of characters, so it doesn't really do that. But a Pearl character is going to have very different non-dialogue text because it's sort of bouncing around in her head, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I loved it. And I could definitely feel it up here with Julia and Frau Bachmann with this image. Like this feels different than this one, than the one where you've got uh John and the Breesons
Mm-hmm.
in the next piece. There's almost something, I don't know if you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, or if it's just the two scenes I look at, but there's something with the pacing too you're doing with that. Julia's pacing feels a little bit different than the bottom pacing. But yeah, I don't know if that's just the two scenes I'm looking at, but I liked it. It gave a very different feel between the two third person POVs. Um, yeah, I find that for writers that switch POVs, the biggest struggle they have is not incorporating inner thoughts into the third person. Because once you do it with first person, I find that people like tend to need to do it all the time.
Yeah, no,
It's one of
it's
those drugs. You just can't kick it. You got to keep the inner thoughts. Yeah, that's fun. Um, I really liked, you get a good, like you build a ton of energy here in the piece, starting on page 5, where they just start rolling with this conversation. And the quick back and forth, I found it super engaging. It's like I see like our new friend in the red car, Mr. Rhodes. If you say so, monsieur, then I think you don't know one another. Insurance is a big business, of course. Roads, and so I like the like beating of that because it's that like it definitely has that like quick change con man. I know that's not what's happening in this scene, but it's got that quick change like con man feel where it's the like passing back and forth. There was that great show that did this really well on USA for a long time called White Collar, where when they went into like con man mode, they were just like, passing that conversational hot potato back and forth over and over again.
right.
Uh,
In this one, what I was trying for is the brother and sister have that fast hot potato, and
yeah,
it's not very friendly. They're
no.
they're cutting on each other. And then every
Yeah.
time the father comes in, I want him to be sort of slower, relaxed, like he's not bothered by their squabbling, but he's not going to get into it. And then John is like this extra person, and he's just being polite.
Yeah, he's just present in the midst of this family drama, which is really nice. Yeah, and I like the one of the ways I felt like you were distinguishing voices is Robert's lines tend to be Robert's the father, right?
Yes.
Yeah. His lines tend to be a little bit longer, and you're doing something I like with the dialogue tag to slow him down, which is dropping it in the middle of his, like he has an utterance dialogue tag and then talking, which slows him down in comparison to his two children, which was a nice
Yeah, it's
technique you were
funny. I
using
thought you were
there.
going to bash me for that because I'm always putting dialogue tags in the middle, mostly because I can't stand for the reader to go more than a sentence without knowing who's talking.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think in this scene, because you've got them using so many like one-off sentences, so that paragraph I just read specifically, we've
there's
got
no,
one off, one off, one off, one off, one off roads. Ask Robert, right? Like so that like speed bump like slows everything down. And it's a so yeah, I felt like it was a really strategic use of them, that like pausing moment where you're like, okay, now the heavy, like now the dad's gonna speak and it like a little bit slower pace, a different cadence than his kids. Um, and like slowing it down with a question, right? Like because he follows that like ask Rose with another question, like makes it pulls something about questions in language pulls the attention away from the topic, like away from the speed, and like makes the other characters process what's going on. So yeah, I thought it was great, man. I liked how you were running the three voices. It's really good.
and I mean, this is the middle of the book too. I mean, no, it's the early third, but one of these people is the bad guy.
Oh, okay,
So
nice.
that's part of it too. Like we want um, Manon and Andre to sound like assholes. I
Yeah,
want Robert to sound very charming and calm. I want
yeah,
Amani to be super, super sort of empathetic and engaging, and I want Stephen to be he's standoffish, but he's not a jerk
yeah,
like the Bressons are
yeah. So this is a suspect reveal
in a lot of
chapter.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. What was the decision to go with French? Do you speak French?
Oh no.
Okay,
um, the um, the first book was all Chicago. Everything,
okay,
the whole book was in Chicago, and this is in northern rural Spain, and um, I had to decide either that the entire book was going to be in English but supposed to be Spanish, and that seemed really really complicated. So I
yeah,
thought it's Europe. Let's bring in some English speaking characters, and these French characters would definitely speak English.
yeah, yeah,
They're in French government. One of them is a big, and they work for Council of Europe, and one of them is a big insurance executive. They would definitely speak English, and it just made everything easier.
Well, you sold it on me because you flip into French for a couple lines, and it was just enough to make it feel realistic. So, because you're not doing like huge lines in French, you're just like throwing a couple words in here and there, and I thought it was nice. Uh, yeah, it's well done. Like here, excuse-moi was great. Although I can't hear excuse-moi without thinking of Miss Piggy, which is maybe a personal problem, not a
I
not. A,
also I felt like the the British and the um, having the British and the French gave me a chance to have them clash a bit. Like there's a little thing back there where um, Robert says, "Oh, is she the woman from that cooking show?" And Andre's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And
yeah,
Manon says, he doesn't watch the BBC, Papa."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, and then you throw the German in with Frau Boker earlier, and it's you got all of Europe meeting on this train, man. It's nice.
That was the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you wanted to talk about with the piece? Again, I thought I loved seeing your editing process. I thought it was really fun to see the two of them side by side and look through them like that.
I
Um,
guess my question would be on round three, dialogue wise, where do I want to go? Do I or is it in a fairly good place? I just feel like I felt like that wasn't done. I especially what you said about breaking Julia out a bit. I feel like um, well, you're only seeing one
yeah,
passage.
I only saw a snippet. I would say where I would go is um, so I would have a different recommendation for the first scene and the last scene. Um, in a third pass for the first scene with Julia and Pearl, their voices are nice. Um, you're still a little heavy in here with with like longer sentences. And so this down here, this fast exchange, that was really when I hit my stride. And I was like, oh, this is a mother-daughter talking on top of each other.
Mhm.
It's something you did it so well. I would try to look for places where they can talk on top of each other like that again, because it's a nice thing that they're two characters and it reads that mother-daughter relationship you said you wanted when we were talking about the character wheel.
Okay, so like in that first sentence, it could be, um, okay, what's on the train? Asked Pearl, exasperated, and then Julia could say nothing, and
Yeah,
then
and
Pearl could say, is it the rich old lady? And then she could say, no, it's nothing like that.
I might have them like I wouldn't have them speak directly to each other. So part of that like fun talking on top of each other is that they're commenting on what each other is saying, right? Like so you might want to have like, okay, what's on the train? Pearl asks exasperated, and you may have Julia say something like, can you at least give this a shot
Oh,
before
okay,
we
yeah,
even?
that's great.
Right? Like, and then have Pearl go like, is it the rich old lady? She can't have more than 1,000 jewels, and then you can be like, it's nothing like that, right? Like so throwing that line in there where they're commenting on one another's attitudes, um kind of like you did down here where she's like, this is a freaking hayfield, right? Like she's not actually talking about the topic of what they're talking about, she's just throwing a comment in that's like, you've driven me out here to the middle of nowhere. And that's that like familiar mother-daughter relationship that can have a really nice beat to it, because especially teenage daughters, the thing is like there's the mother-daughter teenage relationship is always unique between families, but there always is a like negotiating with each other what it means to be connected through this relationship with each other, because the even though Pearl is came into life later, Julia's still going to have kind of hopes for her and aspirations for her, and something about that mother-daughter like expectations um, of like who I hope you'll be. You can't help but carry over, right? Like so, I think you're nailing it with that, inserting small comments where they talk about each other's thoughts, and I'd want to see more of that. So when they talk, I'd want to see more of that. You didn't give me a scene with John and Julia. I would be interested to read how their couple conversation sounds different than when Pearl is there. Cause that's probably another thing I'd focus on is those familial relationships between husband and wife, and then father daughter, mother daughter. Cause in the end, that's what's going to connect people to your books long term, is that like
Yeah,
falling in love with the family.
sure. Yeah, I mean they're more on the same page when they're interacting with Pearl, and then when they're by themselves, they don't have fights, but they discuss things in more depth and have different points of view. So
Yeah.
um,
And so the second in scenes like this one, for a third pass where we're looking at Frau Boker kind of and Armani having this conversation with Julia, kind of from Julia's perspective, except it's third person, but it's got that like Julia feel to it.
Mhm.
And this is, sorry, I'm gonna get personal with my edits. For me, I write these scenes and I love them because I'm like, oh, the dialogue's so fun and it's great and the side character's awesome. And so whenever I have to edit one of these, I always have to like pull it back and be like, what am I doing here? Like, am I just having a good time? You'll hear Laura talk about like crossing out entire pages in green ink of my work, and that's what she's crossing out. She's like, "You have a conversation here, Jeff, with a hot dog vendor where you're talking about like 5 different types of hot dogs." And
Yeah,
but
no. The point
yeah,
of this is for Amani and Julia to start to like each other.
yeah, and it works. And but that's what I would come to these like with my red pen. That's what I would come to these scenes with. Like,
Mhm.
is this serving the larger plot, or am I just having a good time? And it's not bad if you're having a good time. It's not bad to keep them, but for me, if I'm having a good time, I want to have like twice the good time I was having. So asking that question helps take my edits in one way or the other, right? Like if it's for a purpose, then I'm going to edit with the eye of like, okay, am I showing that they're connecting, that like Armani and Julia are connecting on a deep enough level? If it's for I'm having a good time, then it's like, am I having a good enough time to justify holding the reader here for like a page while I just screw around with 5 different types of hot dogs, right? Like, so like which way
Right.
do I want to go?
Yeah, no. And it's
Yeah.
funny because when you talk about blowing out scenes, I'm usually cutting scenes back. And it wasn't until talking about how blowing those scenes out gets character across better that I did that more. So my editing tendency is actually to get rid of the anything extraneous,
Yeah.
and realizing that that extra dialogue is not extraneous if it's making it the people seem more real is.
Yeah, especially in a humor piece like this. Like scenes like this remind me very much of Nick Hornby's writing. Like About a Boy, High
Uh-huh.
Fidelity, A Funny Girl is one of his more recent ones. Um, Part of where we find the humor in funny pieces are in these like blown out scenes that like may not necessarily be driving the plot but are just like the characters having a good time together. um
Mhm.
that's where we start to laugh. And so I think for the humor like piece of this, these like blow up scenes are going to be necessary. So when I get to one, I would edit with that in mind of like, okay, how do I up the funny here, right? Like how do I make it more extreme, more how do I take this conversation, this miscommunication to the next level, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah. um I thought your suspect scene was good. I
Thank you.
didn't have a lot of notes. I could always like, as an editor, I can always pick at it. You know how that is. Like as an editor, I can always find something to say. But when I read it, I didn't have any like, oh, I wish he was doing this with this. I thought it was a strong scene. I got a feel for all of the characters in it. Like we were saying earlier, the father's pace is very different than the children's pace, which is great. Um, yeah, I don't, you know, I would probably give it one more read and then leave it.
Okay,
And
good. I mean,
yeah,
and you get John in here the way he behaves with other people when there's nothing at stake.
yeah.
He's super amiable.
Yeah, and that's how he feels. He's just an observer,
Yeah.
which is nice, right? Like, especially for a con man to have that observer so that when he turns it on, you can feel that. Ideally, you'll feel that difference between him being on and him being present.
And
Yeah.
Andre sort of comes at him in that scene that you've got right there, and
Yeah.
he just doesn't bite.
Yeah. Nothing. It's just, yeah, it's good. I liked it. Um, yeah, man. Well, thanks for sharing
Yeah, thank you.
with me. Yeah, it was great. So what's the next steps for the book? You're editing through now?
Uh, it still needs the last 15 or 20,000
Okay,
words. I'm at
cool.
about 40. And again, I stopped for for a year. And so it was really
Yeah.
hard to get back on. And writing the other series is just a whole lot easier, but I actually want to do something else next. This series, The Levelers with
Yeah.
John and Julia, actually they have different names in each book.
Okay.
Their family names are presidential family names. So
Nice.
they're John and Abby Adams in the first book, and their daughter is Suki, which was actually John. They had a John and Abby Adams had a daughter named Suki, which sounds
I
totally
did
20.
not know that, and that's crazy.
Sounds totally 21st century. But
Yeah.
this series was supposed to be much darker and grittier and Tarantino-like, and I don't know if I just can't do it or they just weren't the right people for it. But it lightened up into more Ocean's 11-y very very early on. So
Nice.
I
So,
would
and
like.
this, you said this, what's the first book in the series called?
It's called The Grafton Heist,
The Grafton Heist. Nice.
and it's a weird book because it's a big heist, but it's largely a book about them testing someone they want to join
It's fun.
them, and that, so it's a lot of character because that character fails the test badly.
Yeah, it is weird. I feel like we all have our like little inner writer, and we'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this kind of book now," and our writer's like, "Nope, we're going back to what we were doing before." Yeah,
So I would like to do something more like a, you know, darker detective PI kind of thing, but who knows? So that's
yeah,
what.
yeah. I keep trying to get away from writing thrillers, and like the one I'm writing right now is supposed to be lit fic, and I'm suddenly killing characters. So it's like, oh, I guess this is a thriller too. Like, I guess that's what we're doing with this one as well. Yeah, it's really funny. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording and we can
Great. Yeah,
chat a
thank you
little bit
very
more.
much.
Yeah, thanks.